Introduction. Imagine arriving in a city where a sign on a restaurant door flat out says, "No black people allowed." In one notorious incident in China, a McDonald's in Guangzhou actually posted a notice banning black patrons. In another part of the world, African students fleeing a war were pushed off trains so locals could board first. As shocking as these stories sound, they're real, and they highlight a harsh reality. Some places in this world can feel dangerously unwelcoming if you're a black traveler. Today, we're counting down 10 places around the globe where traveling while black can be particularly challenging. Stay tuned to find out which city earns the dubious title of the world's most racist city. These are destinations where racism, from open discrimination to hostile attacks, has created nightmares for black visitors and expats. But don't worry, we won't just dwell on the negatives. For each place, we'll give you the inside scoop on what happens there, share a quick, relatable, and yes, sometimes darkly humorous, anecdote, and offer some practical tips to help you stay safe if you must go. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more eye-opening travel insights. Hit that notification bell so you won't miss out on any updates. Now, grab your seatbelt. This ride might get bumpy. Here are the top 10 cities black travelers may want to think twice about, counting down to number 1, the most racist city in the world. City number 10, Tokyo, Japan. Japan is famed for its cutting-edge technology, sushi, and serene temples, but when it comes to embracing diversity, it's still playing catch-up. Visiting Tokyo or Osaka, black travelers often deal with constant stares on the subway and an isolating feeling of standing out. In fact, 45% of black expats living in Japan report experiencing racial bias, whether it's being gawked at in public or feeling like an outsider at work. Don't be surprised if you notice that you're the only black person in the room, almost everywhere you go. It can feel like you've become an unintended celebrity. People stare as if you've just stepped off a UFO. Some Japanese media still even portray black people using outdated stereotypes. Yes, blackface on TV still happens in the 2020s, which shows how deep ignorance can run. On the surface, any bias in Japan tends to be subtle, polite bows concealing cold shoulders. You likely won't face open hostility in Tokyo. Instead, you might get the kind of exclusion that's hard to put your finger on. For example, don't be shocked if a restaurant or bar quietly tells you it's members only when you walk in, when in reality they mean Japanese only. This happens to many foreigners. It's a country proud of its homogeneity, so outsiders, especially black visitors, can feel invisible or even unwelcome despite all the civility. Ever felt like an exotic Pokemon on display? Riding the busy Yamanote line in Tokyo as a black person, you might catch a few wide-eyed glances as if you're Snorlax taking up 2 seats. It's awkward, but sometimes you just have to chuckle and wave. Most folks mean no harm and are simply curious. Practical advice. If you're black and visiting Japan, pack some extra patience and confidence in your carry-on. Don't take the staring personally. Often it's stemming from lack of exposure rather than hatred. Larger cities like Tokyo have small communities of black expats. Consider connecting with them for support or advice on black-friendly hangouts. And if you encounter a Japanese-only establishment, just shrug it off and find a more welcoming spot. There are plenty that will be happy to have you. Despite the awkward moments, Japan is generally safe. Just be mentally prepared that you might feel like the odd one out at times.
City number 9.
It is Seoul, South Korea. K-pop, Korean BBQ, dazzling skyscrapers. Seoul has so much to attract travelers. But underneath the modern glitz, South Korea can be tough terrain for black visitors. This highly homogeneous society isn't used to seeing people who look different, and it shows. Black travelers have reported everything from taxi drivers refusing to pick them up, to clubs and bars denying entry with blatantly racist "no foreigners" policies. In one notorious example, a club in Seoul infamously had a sign reading "No Africans, no Egyptians, no Moroccans," a jaw-dropping display of discrimination. While such overt signs are rare, the attitude behind them isn't. Over half of black expats in South Korea, about 55%, say they've faced racial discrimination. Walking down the streets of Seoul, expect double takes and maybe a bit of distance. You might feel people avoid sitting next to you on the subway or get eyed with suspicion in shops. Part of this comes from ignorance and stereotypes. Korean media, for instance, has a history of insensitive portrayals of darker-skinned people. And unlike in many Western countries, there are no strong laws in South Korea mandating equal opportunity or punishing racial bias, so old attitudes change slowly. On a night out, don't be surprised or take it personally if a bouncer tells you a club is full when you clearly see space inside. Black and other foreign patrons have shared countless stories of being turned away from Seoul's nightlife venues with weak excuses. It's so common that expats have informal lists of which places to avoid. Even some Airbnb hosts have been known to cancel reservations once they realize the guest is black, a horrible practice that occasionally comes to light. One black traveler joked that in Korea, he felt like the last cookie in the jar that no one dared to touch. People were curious enough to stare, but too unsure to interact. The upside? You'll definitely have personal space on public transport, because sometimes locals will choose to stand rather than sit next to you. Practical advice. When in South Korea, it helps to go out with a group of friends, safety and strength in numbers. If you're hitting the town in Seoul, research foreigner-friendly bars. There are many spots popular with international crowds where you can have fun without the side of racism. Learn a bit of Korean if you can. Even a simple "안녕하세요" greeting can break the ice and show locals you respect the culture. And if you do run into a discriminatory situation, say a taxi passes you by, try not to let it ruin your mood. Instead, have a backup plan. Use public transit, which is excellent in Seoul, or rideshare apps that are more regulated. Remember, many Koreans, especially the younger generation, are warm and welcoming, and there are activism groups in Seoul pushing back against this xenophobia. Seek out those positive pockets. City number 8. Delhi, India. India is a vibrant tapestry of cultures, colors, and cuisines, but it also has a well-documented problem with colorism and racism toward people of African descent. In Delhi, Mumbai, or Bangalore, black travelers and African expats often report rude comments and even outright violence. In fact, a staggering 62% of black expats in India said they have faced racial discrimination. The prejudice stems from a long-standing bias favoring lighter skin in Indian society, rooted in history and media. Think of all those skin-lightening cream ads. Unfortunately, this means darker-skinned foreigners can become targets of suspicion or hostility. In New Delhi, for example, African students have endured terrible incidents. One high-profile case was the 2016 murder of a Congolese student, Masonda Kitada Olivier, who was beaten to death in a Delhi street after an argument. Many believe his race made him a target. Indian officials insisted it wasn't a hate crime, but African diplomats strongly disagreed, citing it as part of a pattern of racist attacks. In 2017, in a suburb of Delhi, a mob of hundreds went on a violent rampage against Africans after a local teen's drug overdose was, wrongly, blamed on Nigerian residents. These are extreme cases, but they have created an atmosphere of fear. Even day to day, Black visitors in India recount stories of taxi drivers overcharging or refusing them, landlords denying rentals, and people openly taking photos of them like they're an attraction. Walking through a market in India, you might hear the word Habshi, a derogatory term for Africans, muttered, or encounter locals who assume you're a drug dealer or bad influence because of ugly stereotypes. A traveler once described the experience as being treated like a suspect everywhere I went, from extra bag checks at malls to getting stared down by police. And the staring? Indians are famous for staring at anyone who stands out, so as a black person, expect double the usual dose. Some children might even innocently try to rub your skin to see if the dark color comes off, a shocking, ignorant gesture that has happened more than once. Navigating India as a black traveler can feel like being a celebrity and a criminal at the same time. 1 minute, someone wants a selfie with you. The next, another is eyeing you like you stole something. It's a wild roller coaster of attention. You have to laugh at the absurdity. For instance, a Nigerian expat quipped that he started charging for selfies after the 100th request just to see people back off. Practical advice. If you're black and planning to visit or live in India, do your homework. Stick to well-known areas and avoid less policed neighborhoods, especially at night. Connecting with the local African Troja black community is crucial. Cities like Delhi and Bangalore have associations of African students. They can offer guidance and a sense of solidarity. When dealing with service people, shopkeepers, drivers, a confident attitude goes a long way. Show that you know the local prices and customs to avoid being taken advantage of. Sadly, you might encounter rude behavior. It's okay to firmly call it out. For example, tell people not to touch you or take photos without permission. On the upside, many Indians, especially educated urban folks, are extremely hospitable and will go out of their way to make you feel welcome. Seek out those allies. They do exist. And remember, India's diversity is huge. Places like Goa or parts of Mumbai are pretty cosmopolitan and chill, so your experience can vary widely by region. Plan accordingly, and you can still enjoy the richness of India while staying safe and sane. City number 7. Athens, Greece. Sun-soaked islands, ancient ruins, delicious gyros. Greece seems like a dream destination. But for black travelers, and especially black migrants, the reality can be less sunny. Over the past decade, racial tensions in Greece have escalated, especially after the migrant crisis of the mid-2010s. Athens, the capital, is generally fine in tourist areas, but venture into certain neighborhoods or smaller towns, and you may encounter some of the not-so-friendly locals. Refugees and migrants from Africa have reported hostility. And unfortunately, that can spill over to any black person in the wrong place at the wrong time. One big factor is the rise and fall of the neo-Nazi Golden Dawn Party, which for years openly stoked anti-immigrant hatred. In the early 2010s, racist violence in Greece became a stark reality, with Golden Dawn members and supporters implicated in attacks on Pakistanis, Africans, and other foreigners. Even though the party's leaders were later jailed, the attitudes they inflamed haven't vanished. There have been reports of verbal abuse and even physical assaults against black people in Athens, especially outside the touristy city centre. If you're on the metro or walking around, you might get some cold stares. Greeks can be direct like that. And in some cases, black visitors have been called ugly slurs by taxi drivers or random people, particularly during heated moments like soccer matches or political rallies where nationalism runs high. Step outside Athens, say to smaller cities or villages, and you might feel even less welcome. There are anecdotes of bars in provincial towns quietly refusing to serve African NATO servicemen stationed in Greece, simply pretending they're out of stock once a black patron walks in. It's absurd and, yes, racist. According to reports by human rights groups, racist incidents in Greece spiked along with the influx of migrants. Hate crimes, often targeting people of African or Asian origin, rose markedly in the late 2010s. While authorities have taken some action, Athens even set up a special hate crimes police unit. Enforcement is still spotty. Navigating Greece, while black might have you channeling your inner Socrates, practicing patience and philosophy when faced with ignorance. You might joke, "This is Greek hospitality. Someone get Zeus on customer service." One traveler said he started wearing a t-shirt that read, "No, I'm not from there, I'm from Chicago," just to confuse people who were about to make a rude comment. Sometimes a little humor disarms the situation. And hey, at least you'll never get lost easily. Chances are everyone remembers seeing you, since you stood out like the only olive in a bowl of feta cheese. Practical advice: stick to the main tourist areas and islands where diversity and reliance on tourism makes locals more welcoming. In Athens, neighborhoods like Glyfada or the Plaka are generally safe bets, whereas sketchier outskirts at night, or far-right protest areas, should be avoided. If you're black, you might also want to avoid engaging in political discussions with strangers. Tensions can run high, and it's not uncommon for extremists to spout off xenophobic nonsense. Travel with a companion if possible, and stay in well-reviewed accommodations, hosts with experience welcoming international guests. The vast majority of Greeks are kind, friendly, and hospitable, proud of the concept of philoxenia, friend to strangers. Many will be curious in a good way, expect questions about your background, etc. If someone steps over the line with a racist remark, the best approach is usually to shrug it off and move on. Arguing rarely changes minds. Finally, remember to enjoy the good parts. Soak in that Aegean sun, explore the Acropolis, and know that you have every right to be there as anyone else. Don't let a few ignorant people ruin an otherwise beautiful destination. City number 6. Rome, Italy? Italy, the land of pizza, art, and la dolce vita. But if you're black, Italy might occasionally feel more sour than sweet. In recent years, Italy has seen a surge in openly racist incidents, many aimed at African immigrants. Even black tourists and expats can get caught in the crossfire of these ugly attitudes. In fact, racially motivated attacks in Italy tripled between 2017 and 2018, coinciding with heated anti-immigrant political rhetoric. The far right even rose to power on slogans of "Italians first," creating a climate where some people felt emboldened to act on their prejudices. In Rome and other big cities, you might not face blatant hostility on every corner, but subtle discrimination is common. Imagine sipping your cappuccino at a cafe only to notice the staff ignoring you or giving you frosty service. Black travelers often report feeling unwelcome in Italian shops, restaurants, and nightclubs. Sometimes it's glaring, security tailing you through a designer store in Milan as if you're going to steal that Gucci bag. Other times it's more overt. There have been cases of black tourists being told a bar is full when it clearly isn't, or getting seated in the back near the kitchen while white patrons get the window seats. Let's not forget football, soccer culture. Italy has an unfortunate problem with racist football fans. Even if you're just a visitor, if you attend a match or wear a jersey of a black player, you might hear monkey chants or slurs thrown around. It's that bad in some stadiums. And then there are the truly scary incidents. In 2018, an Italian extremist in Macerata went on a shooting spree targeting random black pedestrians, injuring 6. In 2019, a young black Italian athlete had eggs thrown at her, and another black man was beaten to death in a public square in Voghera by a man with far-right ties. These incidents made headlines and underscore the violence lurking under Italy's surface. Even Rome, with all its cosmopolitan gloss, saw a Ghanaian man murdered by neo-Nazis some years ago. Many attacks target immigrants working as street vendors or migrants on the margins, but they create an atmosphere of dread for anyone black. It's almost ironic. Italy loves black culture, from music to sports stars, but some Italians seem to have a problem with actual black people. One African-American visitor quipped that in Italy he felt like a celebrity because of the constant looks, but also like a criminal because of the suspicion. He joked, "Should I sign autographs or show my receipts to prove I paid?" On a lighter note, sometimes the ignorance is laughable, like locals assuming you're from a famous sports team, Mario Balotelli's cousin, or shouting, Obama at you. Yes, this happens. You have to shake your head at the absurd mix of flattery and racism. Practical advice. Italy's a place you can absolutely enjoy as a black traveler, but stay vigilant. Major tourist spots, Rome, Florence, Venice, are usually too busy making money off tourists to give you trouble. But still watch out for petty scams or bias. If you feel you're being discriminated against, say, consistently ignored by a waiter, you can ask politely in Italian if there's a problem. Sometimes just showing you speak the language, even a little, earns respect. Italy has a sizable black diaspora, including Afro-Italian communities. If you're staying longer, connect with black Italians or organizations. They know the landscape and can point out safe spaces. When using trains or public transit in smaller towns, try not to be isolated. Unfortunately, there have been cases of harassment in less crowded train cars. And perhaps most importantly, know the recent history. Certain regions, like the far south or some provincial northern towns, have had more xenophobic incidents. Research your destination and, for example, big cosmopolitan cities and touristy coastal areas tend to be more relaxed, whereas some inland towns might be less exposed to diversity. The good news is many Italians, especially younger folks, are opposed to racism and will step in to help if they witness something. So surround yourself with the good and you'll minimize the bad. And yes, keep enjoying that gelato. You deserve it, especially after dealing with any extra stress on your trip.
City number 5.
Tel Aviv, Israel. Israel is a complex tapestry of cultures, Jewish, Arab, and many others, but it hasn't quite figured out how to treat its small population of black residents and visitors right. Specifically, African migrants and refugees in Israel have faced intense racism in recent years, and black travelers can sometimes get lumped into that prejudice. Tel Aviv is a city that many tourists love for its beaches and nightlife. Yet it's also where thousands of African asylum seekers from Eritrea, Sudan, etc. live in marginalized conditions, and they've been at the center of a firestorm of bigotry. In 2023, racial incidents targeting African immigrants reportedly rose by 30%, highlighting the growing hostility black individuals face in Israel. The rhetoric from some top officials doesn't help. There have been statements from politicians literally calling African migrants infiltrators and a threat to Israel's identity. For a black tourist in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, the experience can be confusing. On one hand, Israel is used to international visitors and many Israelis are friendly, worldly people. On the other hand, you might wander into certain areas. For example, the Neve Sha'anan neighborhood in South Tel Aviv, where many African refugees live, and feel extremely unwelcome. There have been violent protests and even riots in Tel Aviv targeting African migrants, with racist mobs vandalizing African-run shops and attacking black bystanders. Police brutality is another concern. Black Israelis, including Ethiopian Jews, have protested against what they see as discriminatory policing. As a black traveler, you might not be directly involved in those issues, but you could still encounter aggressive attitudes or profiling by authorities. For instance, airport security in Israel is famously strict, and some black visitors have felt they were interrogated or searched far more harshly than white travelers. If you're visibly African, say of Ethiopian or Sudanese descent, there is a risk that locals might assume you're one of the asylum seekers. There have been awful cases, Africans being spat on in the street or refused entry to bars with an "we're full" excuse similar to elsewhere. One black American who lived in Israel noted that once people realized he wasn't Eritrean, thus not a refugee, they treated him better, which is a sad commentary on how migrants are viewed. Even so, as an outsider, you could get caught in the general xenophobia. Don't be surprised if taxi drivers try to overcharge you, thinking you're illegal and desperate, or if you get extra questions at hotel check-ins about your background. It's not everywhere, but it's enough that travelers notice. A black traveler in Tel Aviv might feel like they're in a real-life spy thriller at times. The amount of suspicion can be wild. Am I being watched? Or am I just important? You could joke that you got the Mossad VIP treatment, when in reality you just got profiled at a mall. One light-hearted anecdote: some African expats formed a soccer team in Tel Aviv and named it United Nations because it felt like every game they played they had to represent all black people to the locals. They found humor in it. Sometimes that's all you can do. Practical advice: in Israel, context is key. Tel Aviv's mainstream districts like the beachfront, Rothschild BLVD, etc. are usually safe and welcoming, so enjoy them. But if you wander into the poorer areas in the south of the city, be aware of your surroundings, especially if there are political demonstrations or tensions running high. It might be unfair, but carrying your passport and ID at all times is wise. If police stop you, a possibility for any foreigner, but especially if you look like you might be a migrant, being able to promptly show you're a tourist could save you hassle. Engage with locals who are open-minded. Israel has many activists and organizations fighting racism. Spaces like the Ethiopian Israeli community centers or African restaurants can actually be very warm and friendly if you go with someone who knows them. Also, be mindful of the security situation. Sometimes what seems like racism, e.g. intense questioning, could be standard procedure that everyone gets at the airport. Don't assume the worst, but stay alert. If you face discrimination, like being denied entry somewhere, you can ask to speak to a manager. Israelis are very direct, and calling out unfairness boldly might actually get results, or at least make them think twice. Overall, enjoy Israel's sights, but keep your street smarts. The history and politics here are heavy. Unfortunately, black folks can get tangled in those prejudices, but knowledge and caution go a long way. City number 4, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, a land of oil riches, holy sites, and ultra-conservative laws. While it's not a typical tourist destination, except for religious pilgrimage to Mecca, many black people go there for work or transit, and the experience can be harsh. The kingdom has a long-standing issue of racism, particularly towards black workers from African countries. Astonishingly, about 70% of labor disputes in Saudi Arabia involve black workers, many of them migrant laborers from Africa, who report harsh working conditions and rampant discrimination. This discrimination seeps into daily life for any black person in Saudi, whether you're a resident or a visitor. In public spaces in Riyadh or Jeddah, black people often report being treated with suspicion or even open hostility. You might notice locals staring daggers at you in a mall, or families pulling their children away as if you're dangerous. Some black expats describe feeling like pariahs, for example, getting ignored by shop staff or having taxi drivers refuse rides once they see a black passenger. There's also a cruel social hierarchy at play. Saudis at the top, Western, white, expats treated politely, South Asian and African people often at the bottom rung, sadly. Anti-black prejudice has deep historical roots here. The legacy of the Arab slave trade and colorist attitudes persists. While the government doesn't officially condone racism, there aren't strong laws against it either, so bias runs unchecked. If you're black and fly into Riyadh Airport, don't be surprised if immigration officers give you extra questioning. There have been reports, anecdotally, of African visitors being grilled more intensively or even asked to show unusual proofs, whereas Europeans breeze through. Within the country, the kafala system, sponsorship for foreign workers, has been criticized for enabling exploitation, and black Africans have been among the worst treated, sometimes kept in virtual bondage by abusive employers. This means the average Saudi may have only encountered black people in subservient roles, maids, drivers, etc., skewing their perception. As a result, a black traveler might be mistaken for a laborer and treated without the courtesy given to a guest. It's not uncommon to hear racial slurs. For instance, some South Asian and black people are derogatorily called ABD, Arabic for slave, by locals, a disgusting throwback to racist views. It's hard to find humor in Saudi Arabia's situation. But perhaps one ironic image is that of a black traveler literally melting under the desert sun, only to be met with cold attitudes from people. One expat joked that in Saudi he felt invisible until he made a mistake. Then suddenly all the attention and blame was on him as the black guy. If you have a dark sense of humor, you might quip that you've achieved stealth mode in Saudi, because some shopkeepers will act like you're not even there. Practical advice. If you're black and must travel or move to Saudi Arabia, preparation is key. Stick to your purpose of visit. Saudi isn't a leisure destination where you can freely roam and socialize. If you're there for business or pilgrimage, stay with your group and in reputable accommodations. Be formally polite with everyone. Saudis value decorum, and sometimes showing you're educated and confident can counteract their prejudices momentarily. They might think, "Oh, you're an American," and treat you better than they would an African national. Sad, but true. It's wise to know some Arabic phrases. Even basic greetings or thank you can soften how locals interact with you, demonstrating respect. Connect with the expat community. Other Africans or Black Americans in Saudi can offer support and practical tips. There are online forums and groups. Importantly, understand the laws and customs. You do not want any trouble with authorities here. Even if you experience discrimination, there's little legal recourse, and confronting a national aggressively could land you in trouble instead of them. So maintain a low profile. On the bright side, things are slowly changing. Saudi's Vision 2030 and recent reforms aim to make the country more open. There are reports of younger Saudis being more aware of racism and trying to be more cosmopolitan. Still, until more progress is made, proceed with caution. Expect a level of racial bias and lean on faith or friends to get through any demeaning encounters. City number 3. Beijing and Guangzhou, China. China's emergence as a global powerhouse has drawn people from all over the world, including many black travelers and African students. But despite skyscrapers and smartphones everywhere, some attitudes in China remain stuck in the 19th century when it comes to race. For black visitors, China can be intensely uncomfortable. You will attract attention, a lot of attention, especially outside big cosmopolitan cities. And by attention, we mean everything from relentless staring, random people snapping your photo, to cringe-worthy incidents of prejudice. While China offers stunning sights and rich culture, black visitors often report feeling like exhibits due to stares and ignorant myths about darker skin. Even in major cities like Beijing, black travelers have felt like spectacles. One black woman who toured Beijing recounted how children would cry and run away from her dark-skinned friend as if he were a monster. People would literally try to rub his skin, checking if the black comes off because they thought it might be dirt or paint. It's unbelievable, but it happened, right on the streets of a modern city. This gives you an idea of the absolute ignorance some black travelers face in China. If you think getting stared at in other countries is bad, China takes it to another level. You might feel like every move you make is being watched by curious, and sometimes openly gawking, eyes. In more rural areas or smaller cities, don't be surprised if strangers want to take selfies with you, or conversely avoid you like the plague. In one northern Chinese town, a black teacher noted that people would not sit next to him on the bus. Some even visibly covered their noses, as if expecting a smell. The stereotypes are absurd, ranging from beliefs that black people are unclean to bizarre rumors that touching a black person can bring bad luck. But beyond the ignorance, there's also institutional and overt discrimination. In 2020, during the COVID-19 outbreak, Africans in Guangzhou were targeted in a shocking eviction campaign. They were kicked out of hotels and apartments, barred from restaurants, including that infamous McDonald's with the "No Black People" sign, and left homeless due to irrational fears that they spread the virus. That incident made global headlines and exposed how quickly blatant racism can surface. Additionally, some black expats in China report being denied service in establishments just for being black. English language job ads for teachers have even specified no black applicants, reflecting a bias that equates being white with being more qualified or presentable. It stings when you have cash to spend or skills to offer, but doors shut because of your skin color. On a personal safety level, violent racism, like physical attacks, is less common in China than in, say, Russia or Europe. You're more likely to face stares and weird comments than being assaulted. However, there have been some attacks on African nationals in China, often related to business disputes or police harassment in areas with African communities. Also, be prepared for police stops if you're black. Some travelers have noted that police randomly ask black people for ID or visa proofs on the street, more so than other foreigners. It's often an intimidation tactic to keep African populations in check. Surviving China as a black person often means finding humor in the ridiculous. You might say, "I came to see the Great Wall, but apparently I'm the main attraction." One African-American vlogger joked that in China he felt like a movie star, not because he was cool, but because literally everyone was looking at him, snapping pics or giggling. He'd pose with peace signs in photos with curious locals, turning an awkward situation into a fun one. Admittedly, not every day you want to be on display, but a little playful attitude can turn some encounters around. Practical advice. Big cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen are somewhat more used to foreigners, so start there if you're nervous. In these places you'll still get stares, but also find international communities and venues that are welcoming. If you travel to smaller cities, consider going with a Chinese friend or joining a tour group. It provides a buffer and some social proof that you're not an alien from Mars. Learning a few phrases in Mandarin can help break the ice. When you say ni hao and xi, people realize you're a human who can communicate, not just a walking curiosity. When the touching or photo taking gets too much, feel free to set boundaries. A firm but polite wave off or saying buyao, don't want, lets them know it's not okay. Also, connect with black expat networks in China. There are online forums, WeChat groups, etc., where people share experiences and tips, from where to get black hair products to which areas to avoid. Keep in mind that a lot of Chinese exposure to black people is through media, and often not positive, so you might be the first real black person someone meets. It's not your job to educate everyone, but a friendly interaction can actually leave a good impression and chip away at ignorance. Last but not least, if you face something really egregious, like a hotel refusing you, note down details and report it to your embassy or on traveler forums. Awareness pushes change. China is an amazing place to explore, but for black travelers, it definitely requires a thick skin. Figuratively, that is. City number 2, Kyiv, Ukraine. Ukraine, with its golden domed churches and vibrant culture, might not have been on many travel radars until recent events. But for years, Ukraine has been a destination for African students pursuing education. Sadly, it has also been known as a place of pervasive racism toward black people. A few years ago, a survey ranked Ukraine among the least racially tolerant countries in Europe, and accounts from black residents and visitors back that up. From refusal of service to outright violence, Ukraine has had it all. Walking in Kyiv as a black person, you might get a sense of unease. Some locals stare, not the curious stares of Asia, but more like, "What are you doing here?" glares. There's a significant lack of diversity in Ukraine. Most of the population is ethnically Slavic, so being black makes you stand out instantly. Unfortunately, that visibility has often been dangerous. Neo-Nazi and ultra-nationalist groups have operated in Ukraine's cities, and in the late 2000s there were numerous racially motivated attacks on foreigners. From 2006 to 2008, at least 184 attacks and 12 murders were documented as racially motivated in Ukraine, many victims being African or Asian students. African students have long shared advice like, don't go out alone at night and avoid certain metro stations because of skinhead presence. Police protection was minimal. In some cases, victims even said police shrugged off the attacks, calling them hooliganism. Fast forward to 2022 during the outbreak of war, and we saw racism rear its ugly head in a crisis. Black students trying to flee Ukraine reported being blocked from boarding evacuation trains and buses as priority was given to Ukrainians. Heartbreaking videos emerged of African women and children left on platforms in the cold, pushed back by guards at the Polish border, while white evacuees passed through. The United Nations and African Union condemned this discriminatory treatment, but it highlighted how deeply ingrained the bias is. Even in life-and-death situations, some Ukrainians saw black people as outsiders who should wait last. Even aside from that incident, everyday life in Ukraine could be rough for a black person. There are accounts of people refusing to sit next to black passengers on buses, landlords refusing to rent, no apartments for Africans is something foreign students heard often, and random folks yelling slurs like monkey or worse. The term chorny, blackie, is a derogatory slang some use. A black traveler once recounted how when he entered a restaurant in Lviv, the room fell silent and the staff pretended all tables were reserved, an awkward way to push him out. It's that kind of passive-aggressive exclusion that can wear you down. Some black expats in Ukraine have joked that they felt like James Bond, not because of suave adventures, but because they had to live with such heightened vigilance, always watching their back. One African student quipped that he perfected the art of blending into the shadows, quite literally, to avoid attention at night. Gallows humor aside, it's a coping mechanism in a place where just being yourself can attract the wrong kind of notice. They even had an inside joke calling the experience real-life Call of Duty Kyiv Edition, where instead of zombies, you're avoiding neo-Nazis on the way to class. Dark humor indeed. Practical advice. If you're black and for some reason need or want to travel to Ukraine, at this time war might deter any travel anyway, but thinking generally, extreme caution is advised. Try to go with a group or have a trusted local guide, short friend. Stick to well-lit, crowded areas. Central Kyiv, for example, has police and is usually safe in daylight and early evening when lots of people are about. Avoid wandering alone at night, especially if you sense any far-right presence, like groups of young men with certain nationalist symbols. In social settings, it might be wise to carry yourself confidently and say you're an American or British tourist early in the conversation. Sometimes Ukrainians will treat Western tourists with a bit more respect. A regrettable reality of perceived status. Always have your documents. Police might stop you. There were cases of them disproportionately checking African folks' papers. Have your country's embassy number saved on your phone. If you experience harassment on public transit, move towards other people or near CCTV cameras. Racists are less bold under scrutiny. On a positive note, not every Ukrainian is racist. Many, especially younger people and those in international circles, will be curious and hospitable. Try to connect with those, maybe via hostels or university communities, so you're not isolated. And if tensions feel high, for example on Ukrainian Independence Day or after a heated soccer match, it's best as a black person to lay low. Above all, trust your instincts. In Ukraine, if a situation or place feels off, get out quickly. Your safety, any sightseeing. It's unfortunate to give such advice, but until things markedly improve, one must be pragmatic. City number 1,
Moscow, Russia.
And now we come to Moscow, Russia, arguably the world's most racist major city by many accounts. Russia is a country of extraordinary culture and history, but for black people, it can be like stepping into a dystopian novel. Incidents of racial slurs, harassment, and even brutal violence against black individuals are well documented here. Major cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg might be slightly safer than the provinces, but even in these metropolises, black visitors have faced everything from open hostility to deadly attacks. Let's talk numbers and facts. Surveys have shown that racial discrimination is widespread in Russia. In one poll, 28% of Russians said Africans should not be allowed into the country at all, and only a tiny 4% would accept being close friends with an African. Those stats reflect a deep-rooted xenophobia. Far-right nationalist groups, yes, neo-Nazis in Russia, the irony, have a presence and have perpetrated horrifying crimes. In the 2000s, Moscow was notorious for skinhead gangs attacking people of color. There were cases of African students murdered. For instance, a student from Ghana was killed on the streets of St. Petersburg by white supremacists, and another from Chad stabbed to death in Kazan. More recently, in 2023, a black postgraduate student from Gabon named Francois Angelasili was stabbed to death in Yekaterinburg in what witnesses called a racially motivated attack. Disturbingly, 2 Russian police officers witnessed that attack and did nothing, later getting fired for their inaction. This is the kind of environment we're dealing with. Even if you, thankfully, avoid physical violence, everyday racism in Moscow is relentless. Many black people report being called monkey, obesiana, on the streets. A Nigerian former student described grocery shopping in Russia. A guy walked up to me and started shouting, "Monkey, go back to your country," and threatened to hit me. That was in a public place, in broad daylight. Can you imagine? He also mentioned it was common to get weird looks or hear racial slurs on buses during his years in Russia. Another common issue: housing discrimination. Landlords often post ads saying Slavs only, meaning they'll only rent to ethnic Russians. Black residents struggle to find apartments, even if they have the money up front. And don't expect a warm welcome at all establishments. There are reports of clubs denying entry to black patrons, under false pretenses like private events. In businesses, you might be followed closely by staff or outright ignored. The police can be part of the problem too. Instead of protecting black people, sometimes they harass them, demanding documents for no reason, extorting bribes, or failing to act if a Russian is the aggressor. Essentially, as a black person in Moscow, you're on your own. During the 2018 World Cup in Russia, many black soccer fans actually had a pleasantly uneventful time due to heavy security and a government PR push for friendliness. But outside such controlled scenarios, it's a different story. It might seem there's nothing funny here, but sometimes dark humor is all black folks in Russia have had. There's a joke among African students: in Russia, winter isn't the only thing that might kill you. Watch out for the locals too. Another sardonic quip: I don't need a babushka to tell me to dress warm. My black skin already makes me bulletproof, right? A bitter reference to having to develop a thick skin and be fearless. One more. A black expat said he felt like a secret agent doing missions. Mission 1, buy bread without getting insulted. Mission 2, survive metro ride. It's laugh or cry, and sometimes you do both. Practical advice: if you are black and find yourself in Moscow or elsewhere in Russia, exercise maximum caution. Preferably, don't travel alone. Go with friends. Avoid known hotspots of racist activity. For example, certain parks or neighborhoods at night. Research and ask locals you trust, often other foreigners or younger Russians aware of the scene. Stick to public places with lots of surveillance, downtown areas, shopping malls, and avoid empty train cars or isolated streets, especially after dark. Use ride-hailing apps like Uber, Yandex, rather than hailing random taxis off the street. There were cases of racist attacks by rogue cab drivers. Always carry a copy of your passport or visa. Police might target you, and you want to stay on the right side of law enforcement. Connect with your embassy or student office if you're there for school. Let them know about any incidents. They can sometimes apply pressure on local authorities to act. Make local friends if possible who aren't racist. They do exist. Many Russians are hospitable and ashamed of this racism. Surrounding yourself with those types can provide some shield. Learning a few Russian phrases might diffuse a tense interaction, or not, but it's worth trying to humanize yourself in the eyes of someone who might just see you as an other. Importantly, trust your gut. If a metro platform empties out and there's a sketchy group eyeing you, leave the area. If someone starts yelling slurs, create distance immediately. Confronting them could escalate to violence, as they might be with friends. Sadly, in Russia, self-preservation has to trump pride in many cases. The goal is to get home safe, not win an argument with a bigot, keep a low profile, and keep communication open with others. Share your live location with a friend when out and about, for instance. It's not a pretty picture, which is why Moscow tops our list. The hope is that one day this will change. But until then, if you're black and in Russia, you genuinely need to watch your back at all times. Travel is supposed to broaden our minds and enrich our souls. But, as we've seen, in some places it can also test your courage and resilience, especially if you're a black traveler. From the overt hatred of Moscow's streets to the insidious biases in a Tokyo cafe, they hate black people here, is a sad reality in pockets of our world. We've counted down 10 of the most notoriously racist cities, but this list isn't exhaustive. Unfortunately, racism can be found in many other places too. The purpose of this list isn't to scare you out of traveling, it's to prepare and inform you. Knowing what challenges you might face means you can travel smarter and safer. If you do choose to visit any of these destinations, go in with your eyes open, lean on supportive communities, and have a game plan for tough situations. Also remember that positive experiences are possible in all these places. There are people in each of these cities who will welcome you with open arms, defy the stereotypes, and maybe even apologize for their countrymen's behavior. By traveling, you're also subtly educating others. Many locals in homogeneous societies have literally never met a black person. Your very presence can challenge their prejudices, or at least make them think twice the next time. It's a heavy burden to bear on a vacation, we know. You're there to relax, not fight racism, but it's an unspoken reality that black travelers often end up as unwitting ambassadors. Wherever you go, hold your head high. You have every right to explore the world. The hate some people throw at you is a reflection of their ignorance, not your worth. By being aware of the risks and staying alert, you can still enjoy traveling while minimizing danger. And for those watching who aren't black, we hope this was eye-opening. If you see a fellow traveler facing racism, stand up and support them. Sometimes an ally can make all the difference, turning a potentially bad scene into a show of unity against hate.